Hello there and welcome to a brand new day in the studio. In today's video we're going to paint an alla prima still life painting of a still life object that we have set up right here. It's just a regular old coffee maker. And today on the palette what we have is titanium white, burnt umber, ultramarine blue, and ivory black. So we're using a fairly limited palette today, and we're going to be using Liquin Original as our medium. So what we're going to want to do, just like we do with the portrait painting videos, is we're going to mix up a little bit of a value scale. So I'm going to use just the medium and ivory black for my first value. I know today's going to be a little bit different, a little bit chill. So we have ivory black. Another one will be ultramarine blue, burnt umber, and the titanium white. And if you want to know, so if you're new to this channel and you want to know exactly what materials I'm using, you can always go ahead and scroll down to the description box below. But I can already just tell you these are Winsor and Newton brands. So another value right there. And then we're going to mix up yet another one. So we want just a few little values. So just 4 values should do for right now. So 1, 2, 3, and our lightest value. And so what we're going to do is we're going to designate a brush to each one of these values. That's going to allow this painting to go much faster. Alright, so there goes our 4th value. Let's put even more paint in there for that. You know, and this on its own isn't even straight white either. So we're going to still have room to go after this value. So what do you say we get some brushes? So now we have our 4 brushes. So let's go ahead and start off with one that we'll use kind of for the middle ground. So I want to add a little bit more of the Liquin Original. That's just to increase the fluidity of the paint. So we want something that's warm but not too warm. So that's why I only have burnt umber. And we want something that is not as bright to start off with. Just a little bit of a middle tone. This is going to help the painting go very, very quickly. This is a very fun way to paint. Just a way to relax. And I think that ought to be about good. So what we're going to do is we're going to go right for the value. And I know that the value of the canvas, oh, by the way, this is an old linen canvas that I had before and just kind of painted over it with palette knife. So right now, I know it's kind of impossible to see, but I'm just putting in kind of my first little guesstimation with this value of where I want this object to fit. Pretty much front and center and a little bit higher up. How about that? All right, now to switch to a different brush, we're going to switch to the darker one. And right away, let's go ahead and just make our mark. So I'm going to say that I want the bottom to fit right there. So how about this? I'm going to switch back and forth from just 2 brushes for now. So I'll put the other 2 down. I'll pick them up later when I need them. And you could do this with any canvas you want. It doesn't have to be a linen canvas like this one. This is just what I had lying around in the studio. So just establishing a point where I want the bottom of the still life object to fit. And I'd say right around there is fine. And now I want to establish the top of this still life object. So what do you say? Somewhere over there, just using the ivory black, and there's a little bit of oil paint on the surface where I'm applying the ivory black. So remember that value here I applied early on, so we're definitely using the wet on wet technique, also known as alla prima. So let's suppose that the top is going to fit over there. Just letting the paint do the work. We're going to very quickly put in this value for the top. See that? Quick and simple, letting the paint do the work. Of course, there is a little bit of drawing technique that goes into this, but not much. Simple straight line right there. And it really helps to have the still life object right there, right next to you. as opposed to having to look away. And this is another nice opportunity to work from nature, to work from life. Honestly, I enjoy working from life so much. I want to be able to just go into the studio every single day and have a model right there in front of me. One day we'll have that. So now it's going to start to taper off to about there, you know, and if the outline isn't perfect in the beginning, which it never is, not a problem. So right now we're just establishing the basic shape. The basic shape at this point should be about, I don't know, almost there. Let's say that. Basic shape will be almost there. Not perfect. You know, and that's the beauty of still life. You know, I don't want to upset anyone, but in still life, you can get still life a little bit different. You can make it look a little bit different and get away with it. With a portrait, people point it out. People are much faster to point out mistakes on a portrait. So now with the ivory black, we're just going to take a look now at this little shape out here. And looking at this little angle, it goes all the way down here, just trying to get that shape and value at the same time. Super simple. You know, so when one form meets another form, right about there, there's going to be a dark shape that's almost completely blocked off by the light, and that's going to be your darkest accent. So let's go ahead and go into that middle value, you know, the one that you can't really see too much, and let's just use it to apply a little bit of a cast shadow here. Now this is a shadow that's going to be casted from the still life object. The main lighting is coming from this direction, so we're going to have a little bit of a shadow being projected right around here. Now it doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't have to be perfect. Super simple. This is definitely a painting you can create if you've never made a painting before. No one's going to judge you if you make this object a little bit too skinny or a little bit different. No one's going to judge you for that. It's not a portrait. Alright, so let's go ahead and put in, with the ivory black, and a little bit of pressure. See that? A darker shape on the corner right about there. And now we're going to start to put in our first little gradations. And letting the brush do the work, we're just pushing down. Super simple, just pressing down. And we are painting wet on wet. So we will be able to automatically get the value changes to work. Now up here, it's going to be a little bit darker. Just a little bit darker up there. And over here. And now I'll tell you what, let's let the magic of the alla prima technique come into play a little bit. So let's take a clean brush now, a little bit of Liquin Original, titanium white, tiniest bit of yellow ochre. Gosh, sorry. Burnt umber. I'm so used to having my yellow ochre there, but I don't have yellow ochre here just because I don't want it to be too chromatic. And this is a very monochromatic scene, so sorry about that. And now, with that very simple highlight, we're just going to drag the brush down. And now with a much larger brush, we're going to cover the background now. And so we want something that's a little bit cooler. So we're going to sneak in a little bit of a cooler color just to kind of contrast the little bit of warmth that we put into the main lights. Fairly thin, using the Liquin Original to thin it out. Now we want a value that's dark, but not quite the darkest dark, so that's why we're using a little bit of burnt umber now. So back into the ultramarine blue, just to return that kind of bluish tint. So I just very quickly want to cover a dark shape for the background. And it's okay if we lose the drawing a little bit, but we don't want to lose everything now. Quickly, quickly. This is a very fast way to paint. So let's go ahead and cover. Alright, now we're going to return to the main darks. So again with the ivory black, I'm going to try to push this dark shape a little bit darker. And over here. So we're looking at the main large value families. So basically the background is pretty dark, but it's not as dark as basically the reflection on the side of this metallic object. Now we're going to switch back to the smaller dark brush that we had and apply pretty much just ivory black. Try to get this value back. Painting value per value. Do you want the form to read? You need to understand the value. This is pretty much the darkest value. Single brush stroke there and right there. But since I applied the brush stroke in that kind of direction, it's going to create a glare. So that's why I'm going to use this now, my fan brush, just to help cut back on the glare. Now switching back to that darker brush, the larger dark brush, I'm just going to cover a tone over here. We're going to let it kind of dissipate as it gets closer down here, but we're still going to suggest that there's going to be a little platform here, so a little bit more light, just taking right from the palette. So we're just going to suggest that there is a platform down here. Very simple. Again, this is a nice little change from the usual. I might do a couple more alla prima still life paintings just because, you know, they're fun. It's a nice way to relax and to contrast the more time consuming figurative painting that we're doing. And again, we're going to push this shadow a little bit darker. So now it's all up to those large value families, and once we figure out those large value families, it's just a matter of putting the right brush strokes in the right place, and then we're going to call this done. So now let's switch back to a different brush. Let's say this one that had the original light that we had. And just add a little, we're just going to add a little more titanium white to that to continue to push this value. Very, very bright. So the titanium white and the burnt umber, again, look for the lights. And then right here, there's going to be a little sharp ridge. Super simple. And now we're going to add a little bit of ultramarine blue to that brush. Titanium white. And now we're going to start to put in these bluer strands of highlight. Really try to get that metallic look. And now another bluish highlight. There are two little streaks of bluish highlight. They don't quite match up down here, but that's all right. That's okay. Now switching to a smaller brush, I'm going to add a little more this is Liquin original. I'm just so used to saying Neo-McGilp, which was the medium I was using before until I couldn't find it in my art store. But anyway, Liquin original works just fine. And you'll notice I keep switching brushes just so that I don't have to clean them off. Again, just to make this process a little bit faster. So this is pretty bright and a little bit warm. but not overly warm, so that's why, again, I'm using just burnt umber. So now we're going to return to the highlights. Just adding a much brighter light there now. And now switching to the other light brush, I'm just going to add a little more burnt umber to it. There's going to be another light strand over here. And I think you know what this strand is? Take a guess. What do you think is reflecting a kind of warmish color here? It's my easel. My easel's reflecting this kind of warmish tone. Very simple. Again, we're really painting value for value, trying to get the effect of light very, very quickly. And now we're going to go return to this. Just kind of just make it a little bit lighter. Trying not to lose the blue too much. It's a little bit more straight than I had it. Now switching to the brush with the dark, there's going to be another dark little accent right over there. And now with a little more ivory black, we're going to really try to push this value. Just a single brush stroke there. And this is a perfect exercise for those of you that have never painted before. This is definitely a way to get into oil painting. Now then, we just have a few more little areas of specificity that we want to bring to light, and then we're going to call this one done. I did say this was going to be a quick painting. And you know what, I'm having a lot of fun with this painting and just filming it, the filming process. So might do a couple more of these along with those master studies that I wanted to do as well. A whole bunch of fun other side activities just to balance the longer projects that we're working on. Few little spots of value in the right place will do all the work for you. You know, but the trick is finding where they need to go. Once you find out where the brushstroke needs to go, really, you know, it's going to sound very redundant to say this, but once you find out where those brushstrokes need to go, painting is just a matter of painting. Literally just putting down the mark, standing back. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, you change it, and that's it. It's all about observing these shapes. You know, and not getting too hung up on trying to create a perfect photographic image, unless that's what you're after. We want to paint things that look like you're really observing it. Like it was painted from human observation, not from a mechanical reproduction. That's what we're after. See how with each individual brushstroke we're starting to further describe the forms. And you'll notice we're using a very, very limited palette. Don't need that much color. What matters is the form and the value. But in this case, it's mostly really about these reflections. Trying to get these dark shapes in the right spot. Dark shapes in the right spot will give you the illusion of something real that's really there in front of you. A little more burnt umber. One brush stroke at a time. And it really helps to have a separation between your brushes. So that's another little accent shape there. And that's going to be, of course, the accent where this top form meets this bottom form. And so there's going to be a little bit of light right there. Right there. And I still feel like I can blast the light a little bit brighter. Switching to a different brush. Titanium white and just a tiny, tiny bit of burnt umber. Yes. There we go. There's that extra value that we needed. Now we'll just put one over here. There. Don't want to go crazy with the value or with the highlights. You know, the tendency is, oh wow, the highlight looks great there. Let me put them all over the place. And then you have highlights everywhere. And if you have highlights everywhere, they're not highlights anymore. For them to be highlights, there needs to be only a couple of them. A little more of a dark shape right there. Just to get the little area where the coffee pours out from. And look at that. Look how the form is starting to emerge now. This is a lot of fun. Now then, we need to still further delineate the dark shapes. So right around here. Now I'm looking at each corner of this canvas, each corner of the rectangle, and making sure that this angle is the same as this angle. It probably won't look completely right on the camera, just because of the photographic distortion. So this angle here has to relate to this angle there. You can also use straight lines to help relate them. Now another idea about alla prima is that thinner paint will stick onto thicker paint. So the more I apply these brush strokes, the more medium goes into them. See that? Had a little more medium to it. Now this little handle, we're gonna have to get a handle on this little handle. We're going to want to figure out where this handle is going to go. And here I'm going to show you a really neat alla prima trick. Yep, you can do that easily, just move something. And it's just a matter of a few brush strokes, just a few brush strokes in the right spot, observed from nature, that will give you the illusion of the form. You know, we're not after a perfect photographic rendition of this, not at all. Not at all. There's a few little lights, a few interesting little lights to describe right around here. Highlights. Highlights of which have values darker than the main highlight. There, and there. And that's observed at a distance, really. You really want to observe that at a distance to really gauge that. Goes a little bit further down there. A little more painting medium. Now at this point you really want to stand back and just see just observe what is most essential to getting these forms to read. The minimal amount of information to get this to work. So for me, it is to differentiate the corner of this little edge here from that dark, and to push this little shadow here. So we're just going to push the shadow a little darker there. Wrong brush, wrong value. That's all right. Let's get a little more ivory black. So pushing that out a little bit, perhaps too much. It's all right. We can push that shape right back in with the cast shadow. And I think there's going to be a little bit of warmth to that shadow. So we'll push a tiny bit more warmth there with the burnt umber. See how that pushing that little differentiation there really does a lot for the big picture. And I know you're kind of really off to the corner there, but you can really kind of see from that angle the simplicity of the shapes. And you know, this area here is still going to get a little bit darker. So this this main light is going to be a little bit closer in value to that shadow, but you know, not that close. Just a little bit. And we're going to put a little more warmth into that too with the burnt umber. Super simple. You know, and I think we might title this kind of like a paint along. Maybe I can get a decent picture of this and put it on the corner of your screen once in a while, so you can follow along with me. Now that highlight is going to start to taper down. So now we're going to start to really describe the curvature of this bottom area. Tapering down a little bit. I'm really going to tuck in this little highlight right down there. Super simple. Now we're going to return to the dark brush and go ahead and put in this accent. Really dark. I'm going to add a little bit of burnt umber to it, just again to add a little bit of warmth. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just very softly now start to soften the edge around it. And again, this is kind of an alla prima technique. So we're painting wet on wet and letting a wet shape of paint kind of just soften by touching another. You can also think of this as blending. But just doing this to achieve a certain delineation between the shapes, and that's all. That's all. Really going to push that down there and try to get the curvature. So we're almost there. We're almost there. I just think that these highlights can have a little bit more specificity to them. So let's get two of our smaller brushes now. Let's put the larger brushes aside. So we're going to get two of our smaller brushes and we're going to clean them off with our odorless mineral spirits. And we have odorless mineral spirits in this little jar. And just dab them dry on the paper towel. You can create a little abstract painting on the paper towel if you want to. There we go. So that's how you clean them. Very quick and simple. And now what we're going to do is with one of these brushes, we're going to have the very, very light strand. So we're going to remix. It's remix time. So we're going to remix the kind of the coolish highlight. So just a tiny bit of the ultramarine blue into this little area right there. And then we're going to want another brush for the warmish color. So just the tiniest bit of the burnt umber. And now let's add a little bit more specificity into these highlights. And now let's add a little more specificity into these highlights. So you know what, I'm gonna put my hand on the side here. You know, this is a point where I should use the mahlstick. You know what, I'm gonna use the mahlstick. I'll show you what that is. So when you can't really hold your hand straight and you had coffee in the morning, like me, just use one of these things to rest your hand on, just so you don't rest on your hand on the wet painting. So I want to see if that is where I want it to be. After standing back, the pole did kind of slip. So I think that highlight is in the general direction of where I want it to be. Whoops, it's going to keep slipping. Yeah, let's put it there. Now this is the difficult part of alla prima for me, is just getting the paint to stick. And you know, I can't really hold the brush straight. So you know that old saying, I can't even draw a straight line? Yeah, sometimes that happens. It's all good. Now let's go back to the other highlight. And we have that brush right in hand. We're going to try to make it, you know, it's going to be a little more blue. So I'm going to add a little bit more ultramarine blue to it. A little bit more blue. Maybe that's too blue. I don't know. We'll find out when we stand back. There we go. This is loads of fun. Alla prima. Definitely recommend this to those of you that are new to painting. Just take a still life object and try to paint that thing, brush stroke, one brush stroke at a time. It's a nice little contrast to the daily work we're putting into that larger painting, which is also a lot of fun too. All of this is fun. Even when we're struggling, we're having fun. Isn't that a wonderful thing? There we go, a little bit brighter. Making it a little bit brighter here. There. You know, if you really want to get a metallic object to look metallic, you got to look at the highlights. You got to look at the values. Make sure that the values work. And the edges. We're going to soften this little corner down here. Just a little bit. And now we're going to look for a couple other highlights. So switching back to that warmer brush, we're going to just look for a couple other ones, and then we're going to call it done. So right over here, this could be another light, maybe not as bright. And it's not as well defined either. Just kind of a squiggle. A little bit of a squiggle. Add some texture. And even down here. I wonder what that reflection is. I think this reflection is just my wall. My wall that doesn't have that dark fabric. Gonna look for a few more highlights now. A little more burnt umber. Let's go ahead and throw in a few more lights. Almost there. Right over there. And let's go ahead and how about we add a little bit more specificity to the corner of this different brush now. You know me, I have a lot of brushes lying around. You know, I probably should have just used this one instead of cleaning off the others. Oh well. Now I'm seeing that I possibly have the little corner of that a little bit too far out, but you know, that's all right. It's not a portrait. But even though it's not a portrait, doesn't mean we don't put as much effort. It just means we're allowed to take some liberties with still life. There we go. Doesn't have to be perfect. I think now what we'll do is just return to the midtone, this simple midtone value, and just let the background, or sorry, the foreground kind of dissipate into the background. So I'll show you what I mean in just a second. Let's add a little bit more burnt umber. And I think this will just about be the last thing that we'll do. Quick and simple and easy and fun, alla prima still life. Alright, this should be good. So let's just go ahead and apply that value right around here. And this is what I mean by dissipate. So we're going to create a little gradation of tone from the foreground right over here into the background. This creates a nice and simple vignette. You know, and resolve some of the questions as to what's foreground and what's background in a very quick, simple, and easy way. And with that, I think that just about wraps up what I want to do for this quick and simple alla prima still life painting. I'm definitely going to start to introduce more of these alla prima paintings along with the usual studio day in and day out working on that larger figurative painting. And of course, we're still going to throw in some old master studies now and then. So just to change things up a little bit. So I wish you the best in all of your artwork. And as always, I'm trying to bring the experience of being here in the studio to you, creating these paintings every single day. I wish you the best, and I'll be back again tomorrow.